What's going on, YouTube? I am BDobbins, FTW. And I apologize for my lack of Destiny coverage over the last few months. I realize there's been a lot to discuss. The truth is, even knowing I could drop a couple grand on a Forsaken rant, I procrastinated actually playing it, dreading it like that pile of dishes you leave in the sink for months. I might not have played it at all had I not received one too many of those comments from Destiny fans, all some iteration of, "Destiny didn't shit the bed this time, checkmate, BDobbins." For a few months there, everyone was acting like this was happily ever after, but these celebrations were grossly premature. Guardians, this isn't your I told you so moment. It's mine. It shouldn't be a surprise that Forsaken didn't do well. It wasn't that great, and every reviewer that pretended otherwise is a moron. Its central premise was the death of Cade. This is a tired trope that every television series eventually trots out. When ratings are down, you kill off a popular character to spark some interest. But even TV shows aren't usually so desperate that they hype the death in marketing. Can you imagine if Walking Dead had done promos like, "In the next The Walking Dead, Glenn dies, tune in to see what happens after"? That they prostituted Cade's corpse so prominently in the advertising was the clearest indication to me yet that this franchise is a turd in a toilet bowl that's already been flushed, it just hasn't finished circling the drain yet. How Cade's death was emotionally impactful to people is a mystery to me. At what point did anyone actually develop a bond with this character? Did he ever have any inner conflict? Did he change or grow as a character in any way during the last 5 years? What were his ambitions, his fears? What's the significance of his being an exo? Did his relationship with your character develop in any meaningful way? Of course not, because your character hasn't even talked in 4 years. We never actually got to know Cade. He was just a voice in the background making shitty dad jokes while we went about our business. That critics and fans mourned him makes me think they're trained like Pavlov's dogs. They aren't actually experiencing an emotionally impactful moment, but they have seen this cliche played out in enough TV shows, movies, and games that they know how they are supposed to feel, and so they play along. Like dogs. If the shallow veneer of character development that went into Cade is all it takes for massive narrative kudos, it's no wonder so many story game studios are going out of business. Why pay for professional world building and meaningful character development when you can just skate by on cringe one-liners and soap opera cliches? The shortcomings in Cade's narrative are of course only symptomatic of the broader problem with Destiny's story at this point, which is that playing through new content like Forsaken often feels like experiencing extended universe material, but without the context of a primary universe for it to be extended off of. It's like reading about the Arbiter's origin story in Halo without having any idea who the Arbiter is, or what the Covenant is, or that they eventually fight humans. Something written under the presumption that the audience is already aware of key context that in this case we just aren't. After Destiny 1 they ditched the darkness with no canon explanation. It was weird, like if after A New Hope they had just completely cut the dark side of the Force out of Star Wars. Suddenly the first movie would make a lot less sense and it would be monumentally more difficult to somehow link the later movies back to it. There's still no consistent narrative arc connecting Destiny's disparate content. And no matter how many aliens you kill, nothing in the galaxy ever seems to change. When the next DLC drops, you start back at square one. Humanity is still stuck in one city, and all the aliens still want to kill us. Why? Who knows? The central conflict between humanity and every other species remains unclear. Do they all just want to own the Traveler like the roided out turtles from D2? Maybe. But why? Every species seems to already have its own space magic, and the Traveler's magic doesn't seem to do very much for humanity, seeing as we have made zero civilizational progress since the beginning of D1 5 years ago. Which remains the case at the end of Forsaken, minus Cade. The universe is static. The story never progresses forward. Every new DLC is like mold growing off of a stagnant cup of yogurt that's been left sitting in the fridge for too long. I saw a top post on the Destiny subreddit wishing for a game that let them play through Destiny's lore. And I'm like, isn't that supposed to be this fucking game? In fairness, at least this time Forsaken isn't yet another generic Defense of Earth. It's about revenge, apparently. Zavala and What's-Her-Face disagree on whether or not you should avenge Cade. You side with What's-Her-Face. Thus, Zavala says the last city isn't going to back you on this. But like, did they ever? You've always been on your own. Zavala's all like, I'm tired of losing people. And I'm like, when have you ever had to lose anything? I'm the one who's been out there grinding while your fat ass just been chilling at home the whole time. Ikora's like, officially, I can't help you. And I'm like, you never have, with anything, officially or otherwise. It's a redundant plot point. And another thing, Zavala says Guardians are banned from going after the Scorn, which is why Ikora can't help you. But for some reason, that ban doesn't apply to you. Of course the black woman gets held to some double standard while I get to do whatever I want. Typical racist bullshit. Except this time, instead of getting put down by the white man, it's the blue man. Beyond that disagreement, the theme of vengeance is never properly explored. Does your character ever express any hesitancy or remorse about the killing? Does your character ever realize that revenge isn't making him feel better about losing Cade? Or maybe that it is? No, no, and no. Towards the end, you finally catch up with the main bad guy who's surrendered and is defenseless. Your ghost is like, wait, no, let's not execute him. And then you execute him, gangland style. The morale to this story is, I guess, that you should give in to your base instincts and ignore any detractors, and you'll live happily ever after. It has the emotional depth of backwash left at the bottom of a Coke. Anyways, to make up for the lost help you never had, you have to team up with Spider, a space gangster lazily derivative of Jabba the Hutt. Spider also doesn't like the Scorn, because they're on his turf. The Scorn are zombie aliens. What is the plot significance of them being zombies? I don't know. If anything, it only further waters down what's supposed to be the story's thematic conflict, because isn't revenge even less morally ambiguous if the things you are killing are already dead? But then, I am reading deeper into Destiny than it deserves. The point is, if they were just regular aliens, it wouldn't change anything. It's expositional gibberish. Which is unhelpful considering how esoteric Forsaken's premise already is. They pick up on this thread they left off a while ago, with the awoken prince sad that his sister died in the opening cutscene of The Taken King in 2016. This has literally nothing to do with Destiny 2's story, or the 2 DLCs that followed it. Anyway, he's convinced that if he kills his entire species, it will bring his sister back. I don't know the logic behind that. I believe it was implied in D1 DLC that he was doing space drugs or something. Anyways, first time he tried it, he got thrown in prison. This time he broke out to try again. Needless to say, I was a bit confused, which I think Bungie anticipated because they eventually explain the entire story to you in a wall of text on your screen about 2/3 into it. They're like, yeah, here's Forsaken's story. Does this blow your mind or what? To gain some clarity on what was going on, I spent some time with the Grimoire and on the Destiny wiki. And it barely clarified anything, because having Destiny's story explained to you in detail reminds me of when someone tries to explain their dream or acid trip to you, which is just the worst. It's like a whole bunch of random nonsense that they think is so deep, but like, it's not deep. Everyone's dreams and acid trips consist of a bunch of random nonsense. This means nothing to me. It probably means nothing to you, and it doesn't make you special. It is not any more substantive than having a 2-year-old babble on incoherently. So please don't sit here and waste 20 minutes of my life explaining your dumbass dream. Or for that matter, Destiny's backstory. I really think people don't realize how bad Destiny's story is, because it has the illusion of seeming like some intricately crafted universe, and whenever something is opaque, people are just assuming it has some deeper meaning that was explained in greater detail at some other time, and they've simply missed it or forgotten, but that's not what it is. The exposition has not been coherently dictated to us. You're not stupid. The game is. I'm sure there are some diehard Guardians who can give me a 15-paragraph dissertation explaining everything, which I imagine reading will be just as convoluted, pointless, and dull as playing through the actual game is, so count me out. The only thing worse than Forsaken's story is its gameplay. This expansion got excessive amounts of praise for doing things that would be considered pretty basic in any other game. Things like, each boss is unique and has a personality. The enemies aren't reskinned this time. It reminds me of the soft bigotry of low expectations, when a white grandma says something like, wow, he's black and he finished high school, and genuinely believes it's a compliment when in reality it's just a super racist thing to say. For whatever reason, people likewise hold Bungie to a lower double standard than other games. Minor feats are considered impressive accomplishments. Reviews and comment sections are filled with what, in reality, are backhanded compliments that don't testify to Bungie's accomplishments today, but the shortcomings of its past. Though Bungie doesn't seem to mind the damning with faint praise, basking in any excuse to get away with selling everyone a mediocre product. The bitter truth is that this game is still plagued by the same issues that made vanilla so hollow. Large swaths of the game feel more like a glorified walking simulator than actual FPS combat. I can still stroll through entire levels pretty casually without firing a shot, and don't even get me started on the tank mission. When you do fight, the combat is still dry, repetitive, and monotonous. I think a lot of people feel this way. Often when discussing regular combat in Destiny, whether it's vanilla, Forsaken, or as recent as Black Armory, reviewers will sound a rather glum note. IGN describing it as, and I quote, drudging through a boring grind that involves nothing more than shooting enemies, then doing it again, then doing it a third time. Or when I Hate Everything described it in his video as,
what I mean is that it fulfills the same need of a pretty mindless, repetitive action that helps to kill a bit of time and keeps you busy. All you end up with by playing Destiny is repetitive strain injury from pressing the shoot button so much.
It seems like there's something fundamentally wrong with the game when everyone basically dreads what's supposed to be its primary activity, the combat. But I've recently developed a new perspective on this. When I was reading up on millennials' mental health problems while researching my last video, I came across a really interesting article that discussed the epidemic of burnout among people our age. That because we are working longer and longer hours for less and less pay, struggling to afford basic commodities that are becoming only more and more expensive, we are essentially too exhausted to perform basic tasks that fall outside our primary focuses of school and work. This trend is most often associated with our dismal voter registration numbers. As simple a task as it is, we are too stressed out and pinched for time to fuck with it. But its implications are more widespread than just voting. It applies to almost any simple activity that you find yourself procrastinating week after week after week. Doctor's appointments, pet care, household maintenance, responding to emails, whatever. We're all procrastinating and avoiding a multitude of shit, not because it's difficult, but because it is seemingly unnecessary and not worth whatever small amount of stress it inevitably entails. And though the problem is, as always, at its worst among millennials, it's still quite prevalent among the American labor force writ large. Yet again, I was reminded of an article I had read about gaming. This one exploring stress-free mods that remove enemies from games like Dark Souls and Alien Isolation. There's a growing audience for these mods that make a game so easy you never have to worry about feeling frustrated, confused, or pressured. It's no big secret that video games are incredibly effective at reducing stress. Indeed, for the bulk of working gamers, I'm sure this is the primary appeal of gaming in general, the stress relief, even if many don't realize it. Because stress itself is, if necessary, also incredibly toxic. And in the high volumes that researchers say too many of us are experiencing these days, it's as bad for you, if not much worse, than smoking, spiking your risk for cancer, heart problems, and suicide. And I wonder if Bungie didn't pick up on this in their consumer research. It can't be an accident that so much of this game is basically as easy as an enemy-free mod. And those kinds of mods likely would never be super popular because I'm sure a lot of people simply feel silly walking through levels with no enemies. But what if you could make a game that essentially was as easy as that while also having the illusion of overcoming obstacles and player progression? All the reward without the work. It would be an incredibly potent cocktail, wouldn't it? Perfectly suited to today's average overworked and stressed out consumer. If motherfuckers don't have it in them to send a letter, why expect them to learn a game? Poor Destiny fans all this time literally just trying to survive while I've only harassed them. I was meant to save the gamer, not destroy them. I realize now all I do with these videos is stress people out for money. I am become my own worst nightmare. Right-wing talk radio. In all seriousness, I don't generally judge people for how they play games. You want to do it on easy difficulty, or with cheat codes, or abusing glitches, you do you, man. But the line has to be drawn somewhere. I draw it at no enemy mods and Destiny. If you are at the point where you just want to walk through levels, wouldn't you be better off just watching a TV show? It's like with kink shaming. I don't believe in making fun of anyone's sexual habits, because we all have some fucked up shit we enjoy if you dig deep enough. If you get off on watching fat Russian chicks step on bananas, go for it, man, more power to you. But I draw the fucking line at the guys who dress up like babies. And hardcore Destiny players, that is you, the middle-aged men dressing up as babies and doing boom booms in their adult diapers. I judge you. Because no matter how stressed out you are, guess what? This is more important than voting. This is fucking gaming. The problem with such effortless gameplay is that it renders redundant the other entire half of the game, which is the character progression. I see all these news articles and Reddit posts going into absurd amounts of detail about how to customize your character, unlock this or that item, and it all just seems like pointless overkill to me. It reminds me of that meme going around with the guy using He-Man's sword to cut his toast. It's like when little kids get their dumbass parents to buy $3,000 fully customized PCs that they use to play Minecraft. It's like dropping $150 grand to soup up your Ford F-150 with custom treads and a 4 billion horsepower engine so that you can drive into your garage. It's an exercise in futility because you can walk through most of this game even when you're under-leveled. And keep in mind, when watching this walking simulator gameplay, that the official line coming out of Bungie and the Destiny community as to why this expansion didn't sell well is that this time they cater to the hardcore players. And also keep in mind, I'm playing solo in all these clips. I laugh out loud to think of what it would have been like with a full fire team. If there's one gem in the rough, it's the new Gambit mode, which I think was neat. Blending PvE and PvP game modes is something many games have tried and failed to do, but to Bungie's credit, they pulled it off here. 2 teams of 4 are tasked with chewing through waves of enemies. Whoever does so fastest wins, and you can send powerful bosses or human players to fuck with the other side, purchasing them via motes you collect off enemies you kill, with the added twist that the more motes you turn in at once, the stronger the obstacle is that you send to the other side. But if you die with the motes, they are lost. Thus there is an element of exhilaration in both the race and the risk-reward dynamic of amassing motes. It makes for exciting gameplay that was only hampered by the fact that I didn't give a shit about the rewards because it's hard to be invested in the game's character progression at this point. But this is a mode other games should look at. Black Ops tried something similar with zombies once, and Halo played around with Warzone bosses. Both of those modes I thought fell short when striving to accomplish what Gambit pulled off here. Gambit with COD Zombies would actually be sick as fuck, to be honest. But ultimately, Gambit isn't enough to make up for the messy story, lackluster PvE gameplay, and obnoxious sales practices that continue to define this game. So it makes sense that Forsaken didn't succeed in bringing players back into the fold. The main problems which compelled them to leave in the first place haven't been addressed. Following all this, Activision dropped the game, and Destiny fans have obviously been very, very excited about this, certain that it signals a new era of Destiny, that at long last this game will achieve its true potential. And to those fans I say, you're welcome. Activision made it clear the only reason they're parting ways with Bungie is because sales are so bad. I.e., if the franchise's sales had been better, this glorious divorce might not have happened. Thus, the true heroes of this tale are those of us who sought to hurt Destiny's sales. And besides Bungie themselves, who worked harder to hurt Destiny's sales than I did? And you all were giving me the hardest time while I was trying to save your goddamn franchise. So Guardians, I accept your gratitude, and I will also accept written apologies in the comments below. But in reality, I'm not sure this is as good a news as everyone is pretending. First of all, we know from extensive reporting that the biggest problems with Destiny, such as rebooting Destiny 1, rebooting Destiny 2, microtransactions, and purging their top talent like O'Donnell and Staten, are all decisions Bungie themselves made, by themselves. Now you might argue these decisions were the result of Bungie trying to keep up with deadlines laid out in their Activision contract, but keep in mind, even when Activision gave them a year-long delay, they still couldn't get it together for D2, and it's not like Activision programmed this game's dull enemies or wrote its rambling story. Furthermore, the whole reason developers make these kinds of deals with major publishers in the first place is is the resources, because most studios can't produce games on this scale without a sugar daddy. Imagine how absurd this conversation would be if we were discussing a book author. Like, yeah, this guy's books have been trash, but now that his publisher dropped him, I'm sure his writing is going to improve dramatically. It's illogical, and nobody is asking how the author is going to mass produce, market, and distribute the shit on the same scale as before. In my last Destiny video, I suggested that as Destiny became less and less profitable, you would see less money invested in its production, and thus ultimately less and less content released until one day it fizzled into nothing. I feel my predictions have only been borne out since then. The only reason Activision would drop Destiny the way it has is if it felt the franchise wasn't possibly going to make enough money to justify the upkeep costs. There had been speculation the franchise might be sold off, which would have been a better outcome, as it would suggest at least someone thought there was still a profit to be turned on Destiny, but its complete abandonment suggests nobody does. This isn't surprising. With the release of Anthem today and the Division next month, Destiny will be facing its stiffest competition to date. Not to mention the surprise juggernaut that Apex Legends has turned out to be, sucking up gamers' hours played at rates comparable to Fortnite, which even Netflix considers its prime competitor. If Destiny can't perform to expectations when it has the field to itself, how will it possibly hold up now? Following Forsaken, Destiny rapidly reverted back to its truest form with Black Armory. 5 out of 10 content drops that disappointed professional critics and enraged Destiny's most loyal fans, who after everything still bought the annual pass. It's easy to disparage these players for their rage, but it's important to remember in a world where 40% of households are living paycheck to paycheck with nothing saved, you have to fight for every dollar, and you're a dumbass if you don't. Professionals have stopped investing in Destiny. You also should be wary of investing more time, energy, and money into something that probably isn't going to be around much longer. The annual pass itself is kind of a joke. Destiny used to have one large release a year, followed by 2 small DLC packs, but the year 2019 will see a drip release of content that looks as if altogether it will only roughly total one of the $15 DLC packs from the past. Which makes sense, as the annual pass was only $20, but this only further demonstrates my point. They aren't making enough money to continue producing the same amount of content they have in the past. Undoubtedly, part of the problem is the high cost of production of the meager amounts of content they do produce, and without Activision's support, it's hard to imagine how this cycle is broken. Things are winding down. This franchise is rapidly approaching its conclusion. This is the way Destiny ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper.